We are live. Dr. Huchingson, how are you today?
I'm good. How are
Good.
you?
Fantastic. I'm so glad you're here with us. We've got like 15 minutes together to talk all about mindfulness out here to all the people watching now and who will be watching this in recording. And I'm going to kick us off right in the right direction. I titled this Mindfulness is Medicine.
Mhm.
And the reason I titled that is because, well, mindfulness is a tradition that's been used for thousands of years, right? Philosophically and in our spiritual traditions. In the last 40 years, it's gotten a tremendous amount of support from evidence-based science. And so for a lot of people out there, they're somewhat reluctant to try things unless it has some strong background. So I am thrilled to be talking with you here today. And would you mind kicking us off by just telling us a little bit of that strong scientific support that mindfulness and mindfulness-based stress reduction can bring into somebody's life?
Absolutely. So, MBSR, mindfulness-based stress reduction, was developed in the early 1980s by a gentleman named Jon Kabat-Zinn, who is a cellular biologist at the University of Massachusetts School of Medicine. And he brought back a lot of teachings he learned in the East and Asia. And he took out kind of a lot of the sort of spiritual teachings and kind of non-practices that he thought wouldn't be necessarily very helpful to us in terms of some of our struggles. And so he brought it down to the core of what he felt would be helpful. And so he developed sort of an 8-week model of teaching mindfulness skills that has a high degree of fidelity. So it can be taught over and over again in a very similar way. And then used as a research model going forward. So much of the research that's been done in mindfulness over the last 30 or 40 years has used this model of MBSR.
Got it. Got it. Got it.
And so some of the research, what has impressed me about it is a number of things. Jon Kabat-Zinn used it in the hospital up in Massachusetts to deal with things that patients were suffering with that the doctors just didn't have any more answers for. So
Right.
things like chronic pain is a big thing. It can be very helpful for chronic anxiety and depression, and sort of end of life anxieties and such. So he applied it to the medical model and then brought it into a scientific model. And over the last 40 years, there's been a lot of research that shows that it's very effective for a lot of these conditions.
Right? I mean, tremendous amount, right? I know in cardiac rehabilitation, for example, we see better outcomes in patients that take an MBSR class along with their cardiac rehab. I mean, right down to the cellular level, right? We can see changes on the telomere length on the end of the chromosomes. Is there anything else that really stands out in your mind as this incredible benefit to MBSR and mindfulness in general?
There's too many to talk about, but you're right. So there are things like telomere length. So for example, telomeres help protect our genetic cells and keep us from getting cancer. They're attached to the end of each gene, and so the more mindfulness practice someone has, the more evidence there is that they are more protected from the kind of breakdown of these genes, and so theoretically their risk of cancer may go down. Some of the big things are also levels of C-reactive protein, which are markers for inflammation. What we're finding out is more and more is that much of chronic disease and aging has to do with inflammatory issues.
Right.
And so the more we can decrease these inflammatory markers, the healthier we may be. And mindfulness seems to have a big effect on inflammation.
Wow, that's incredible. I mean, I know here at Synchronicity, one of the big things that we do with recovery is we talk all the time about inflammation and the role our diet plays, the role exercise plays. And that's why we recommend so heavily a meditation or a mindfulness practice. So can you give us a little bit of a broad overview of what an MBSR class would look like? Because for those viewers out there, Dr. Huchingson just finished up one, right? April 25th, a group. And I'd love for them to just be a little bit familiar with what maybe they could expect if they were to seek it out.
Sure. So what we do is it's an 8-week kind of introduction into this experience of the mindfulness practice. And we start off really in the very shallow end of the ocean, so to speak. And so we start off, one of the first exercises we do is exploring a raisin. Actually, it's called a raisin exercise. And so it's a very familiar object we all know. And what I invite the group to do is to take a look at the raisin. I pass out raisins to everybody and imagine that they're a Martian and they've never seen this object before. And so this practice of looking at this object with new eyes,
Mm.
and examining all the qualities of it, people start beginning to realize how much they're not noticing about the common things in their life. So we start off with this introduction of raisins, and as we move forward, we move to, focusing on the breath. We move to the body, the motions, doing gentle yoga through the classes. And we start, each class is sort of choosing an object of focus. So mindfulness is being fully present on purpose in the present moment without judgment.
Mm.
And so each class, we're choosing an object of focus. One class is the body, one class is the breath, one class may be sound, one class may be food. And then by the end, we integrate it all together. And we have one full day of a silent meditation retreat, which involves all these practices throughout a day.
Got it. For those of you who have never tried the raisin one, it's incredible. It blew my mind the first time. I thought this is going to be ridiculous. And then after doing it, I'm saying, oh my gosh, what else have I been missing out on in my life? So I started to use that technique, looking at my children, looking at washing the dishes, looking at my wife. And all of a sudden I'm like, whoa, I haven't been looking at them at all. Anyways, it was just a thoroughly awakening experience for me. What are some of the kinds of things that people experience across weeks that you've seen with people going through your program?
Yeah, so a number of things. For example, I've had a couple of people with chronic lifelong pain, back pain, and they've been on opiate pain medications and taken them for years. And during the class, they find that their pain starts to go away, or at least get better.
Right.
And I had one person I'm thinking of in particular, who when they were practicing the practices, they had no pain. Wow. And these are simple. These are not complicated. You don't need to climb up a mountain, and, you don't need to be an expert anything. Right. But when this person was doing these practices, his back pain disappeared. Yeah. And he had less pain overall going forward. And so that's really a profound experience. And other things are, people return to their lives, as you mentioned, and they start noticing things they never noticed before. We've all been so busy filling our lives up with things to do, distractions, phones, activities, trying to make money. And it's like, just this act of slowing down brings so much more interest to our lives.
It does.
So people start having these experiences, and then in the beginning of the class, they're like, well, I don't know if this is for me. I don't know if I'll buy into this. By the third or fourth session, they're like, oh my gosh. And what happens is their family members start noticing they're different. They're like, Dad, what's going on? Like, you're just like a lot more peaceful. Like, this is weird.
Right. And I always, so I'm sorry, please go ahead.
No, it's fun. It ends up being a lot of play, actually. It sounds very serious, but it ends up being sort of playing with our life experience and discovering that that there's really, a whole universe out there that we're missing because we're so focused kind of on the ground just in front of us.
It couldn't be more true. I mean, I think one of the things sometimes mindfulness and meditation practice get this, I think they're perceived as being sort of this almost dead-end state, right? This place of non-living. And I find the experience to be enormously different than that. I find it awakening and enlivening and looking at things in new ways. And not that that's necessarily the outcome that you're always going to have, but boy, it just brings my life more enjoyment, more excitement.
Yeah, it can be a lot of fun and great discovery. And what I tell the classes is, this is an adventure. We're going on an adventure. This doesn't have to be a serious, hard thing. Let's go see what we find. I can tell you what I think may happen, but this is really about your experience. Right. And so let's be a scientist of your life and let's see what happens. Maybe you'll find some surprises.
Right. That's such a great point too, because even though it's a structured, evidence-based process that someone goes through, you have to experience it. What's going to come up for you in that process is unique to you. And that's a beautiful thing.
It is, yeah.
And I know you've gone on a couple of like purely silent retreats as well, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'm wondering because I think a lot of people, when they start thinking about mindfulness and meditation, they say, I could never slow my mind down. That's not me. That's for somebody else, right? And I can only imagine what it's like to bite off like an entire week or weekend of I'm going to be silent for this time. So Can you talk us through what that was like in your headspace, getting ready for something like that?
Sure. So I'll tell you, part of the practice of mindfulness is one thing we learn oftentimes when we're young or in our society is to avoid things that are uncomfortable.
Yes.
And so we often turn away from things that make us anxious instead of toward. And so one of the practices we do in class is practicing turning toward those things that may cause us anxiety. So
Mm.
my first experience of going to a silent meditation retreat, I was scared to death. I was like, what am I doing? My wife was like, this is worse than prison. Why would you pay to go do this? And and I was like, maybe it is prison. But I went, and I tried having a beginner's mind. Of course, I was still scared, but I went and I showed up. And
Yeah.
when I showed up, the first couple of days were very difficult. In a full silent retreat, there's no eye contact, there's no talking, there's no writing, there's no music, there's no drawing. They want you to spend the week with yourself,
Yeah.
which for some of us is the most uncomfortable place to be.
Mm.
And for me, it has historically as well. And so every time now I go to a retreat, there's always a little bit of anxiety, but it's the practice. Once I show up, it's always different. It's always an adventure. I never know what I'm going to find.
Oh,
And so
brilliant.
it ends up being, I use the word fun and play, not in the sense of like, ha ha, laugh, laugh, but in the
Sure.
sense of, boy, this is going to be interesting. Let's see what happens.
Right, right. Openness, like
Yeah.
what's gonna come up? Curiosity, right? Absolutely. So I
Yeah.
know as a psychiatrist, you work with medications and you work with talk therapies and you use mindfulness as well to help an individual get to where they want to be going. I'm curious, have you seen compounding effects by incorporating something like a mindfulness practice with other more traditional therapies?
So this is really what brought me into mindfulness and made me interested in it, is that in my own practices and in the teachings, I started practicing this in 2015. I just happened to go to a training called Mindfulness and Mind Body Medicine, sort of because it sounded fun. I'm like, oh, meditation, I know what that is, and I had no idea. And in over 6 or 7 days, it really blew my mind. But what I found was that, both personally and I'm finding professionally, is that the very simple mindfulness practices that patients or any of us can do at home create flexibility in very much the same ways that doing psychotherapy does, or taking an
Mm,
antidepressant, or exercise as well. It
right.
creates flexibility in the mind so that we can see our life situations, our relationships in the world in new ways that maybe we couldn't have seen before. And so that
Wow.
they really are, they really multiply the effect. So I always tell patients, if you do this thing, you will have to see me less and take less medicine. I'm telling you, I'd rather you go do this, which is free, than
Right.
see me. I like
So,
seeing you, but go, get into this. And I'm here if you need me, but get into this.
so it feels like me and you should go around to all the different specialties and talk to them about how this could add in the medical model overall. Right? What
Yeah,
is
I
medicine?
think nowadays mindfulness is kind of this, it's a little bit of a cliche term, and it's lost some of the depth and the solidity of what it is. And so
Mhm.
one of the reasons I'm enjoying talking to you and coming on here is talking about the importance of having qualified teachers.
Yes.
We need people who know what they're doing and who are steeped in their own practice to share what this is. Because you can't read a book and go teach a class about this.
Right.
You can't
Right.
have a syllabus and teach it well. This has to come out of the teacher's own experience of their own practice. Very
This is so
important.
important, right? And this is something that you have dedicated time to for your own self, your own path, so that you could better help guide other people on. Correct?
Mhm. Yeah, I think, I believe in part of the medical model. I'm an MD, and being sort of Western, I believe in degrees and training and all this kind of stuff. And so, when I ask myself, well, what does it mean to be a mindfulness teacher? What are the qualifications for that? Well, nothing. I can put a sign up on the corner and say I'm a meditation teacher. What does that mean? And so I was very fortunate to come and realize that there are programs in the U.S. that are offered that have deep structure, require deep commitment, and they make you take time. It's not a weekend thing. It takes 2 to 3 years to become a certified MBSR instructor through Brown University or through University of Massachusetts. And so this is a very real thing, and that's very important.
I think it's extremely important, especially if somebody's making a decision on what they're going to invest their money and their time in, right? They want to invest it in the place that is going to allow them to utilize these tools to the best of their ability. So I think it's an essential point. If somebody's interested in checking out what you have to offer, either for the mindfulness-based stress reduction or just to see Dr. Huchingson in general, where would they go?
They can go to my website, which is www.andrewhutchinsonmd.com. That's Huchingson. I teach as I can. My primary focus is on my practice and my patients, and I incorporate some mindfulness stuff in that. I mainly want to encourage, and I'm on here to encourage not people necessarily to come and see me, but people to look into this. And it's a great time actually right now because Brown University, the University of Massachusetts, is offering tons of content on Zoom at a relatively low cost that you can do from home. Small groups. These aren't psychotherapy groups. There doesn't have to be any personal sharing. This isn't that.
Right.
This is really practicing this sort of increasing this muscle in the mind of being present and less judgmental about ourselves. And when we can do that, we can be happier.
Yeah. You used the example for me one time that I think was so beautiful, because this really is about repetition and practice, right? It's about building a skill. And you used the sheet of paper example. Do you mind taking everybody through that?
Yeah. So this mindfulness thing that sounds so kind of in the ether, it's not so complicated. It's and the practice is a lot like going to the gym. For many of us have the experience of going to the gym. We get gym memberships and maybe we don't ever go, but if you go to the gym and you go 3 days a week, each time you go to the gym, you get a little benefit. Okay. If you go work out your biceps once a month, you never noticing difference. You're always sore.
Right.
So to say, if you have a mindfulness practice and you do it very rarely or hardly ever, you're just not going to increase that muscle very much. You're not going to see the benefits. You're going to say, this doesn't work, but it's not, it's a practice. It's like practicing your tennis game, right? So it's if you show up to the gym on a regular schedule and you have a plan and you do it over a period of time, your muscles get bigger. It's sort of like each time you go to the gym, if you put a piece of paper on the counter, you start off and you're like, there's no, I can't see that stack. But after the 50th time, you see a stack. And after the 100th time, you're like, there is something there. And so this takes repetition and practice. It isn't a one-time thing.
That's such a great point. I mean, we all look to these outcomes, right? Here's the outcomes we're seeking for, but it's that process that all this incredible awakening and growth comes from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so that's a great point, because so much of what we may look at as life is being attached to the outcomes, right? Mm-hmm. So we're like, I want to make $1 million, or I want this or that. And life really, in terms of being happy and content, is about process. Yeah. It's about enjoying each step of life, not just the end result of when I retire. And it's That's the same with these practices. It's like, this is process and practice. There's not
really
perfect. We're not going to have a perfect. There is a practice, and things will change.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, Dr. Hutchinson, here's the thing. The reason I set us at 15 minutes, because you and I could probably sit on here for 48 hours and talk about this, right? And I know that we both are very passionate about it in our own lives and sharing it with other people. And so I really appreciate you being on here and talking with us and our audience about all of this. I can't stress enough what a difference it has made in my own personal life. And I am so glad that there are folks like you out there bringing this into the medical model. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Brian.
All right. And I will hopefully be seeing you in an MBSR class, me, Brian, sometime in the near future.
I look forward to it.
Great. Thank you. Have a great day.
You too, Brian.